I made a lot of bad decisions in my life with regards to other things. Yeah. And it's just,
This teenager killed his mother over being punished for bad grades and buried her. He looked deputies in the eyes, pretending he had no idea where she was. But the deeper detectives looked, the faster his entire story collapsed. Gregory Ramos was just 15 years old at the time of this case, and on the surface, there was very little about him that suggested the kind of darkness investigators would eventually uncover. His mother, Gail Cleavenger, was intelligent, creative, and deeply devoted to her family. She studied architecture at the University of Miami, graduating in the mid-1990s. People who knew Gail described her as compassionate and hardworking, but her life hadn't been easy. Before Gregory was born, Gail had endured an abusive marriage with Gregory's biological father. Eventually, she made the difficult decision to leave that relationship behind after Gregory was born. And later on, she found a second chance at stability when she married Danny Cleavenger, who would become Gregory's stepfather. From the outside, it looked like Gail had rebuilt her life. And more importantly, it looked like she was trying to give her son every opportunity she could. Gregory wasn't growing up in complete chaos. He had structure, support, and adults actively involved in his life. He participated in karate, something Gail even practiced alongside him so they could train together at home. He volunteered with the Orange City Police Explorer program, which made him appear responsible and community-oriented. He had also been involved in the Boy Scouts. And that's part of what makes this case so disturbing, because when people hear about teenagers who commit horrific crimes, they often imagine someone who was completely isolated from society, someone spiraling out of control long before the violence happened. But Gregory didn't appear that way, at least not publicly. Behind the image of a fairly ordinary teenager, something darker had slowly been building. And as in so many cases involving young offenders, the warning signs didn't initially seem extraordinary. On November 2nd, 2018, Gregory Ramos made a frantic emergency call. His voice sounded distressed, panicked, and confused.
Oh man.
911, where's your emergency?
I just got home, and my house is completely trashed. It looks like someone broke in the side door.
He told dispatchers that he had just returned home from school and discovered something terrifying. According to Gregory, the house had been completely ransacked. Furniture was overturned. Rooms were in disarray. Property appeared to be missing, and even more disturbing, his mother, Gail Cleavenger, was nowhere to be found, even though Gail's car was still outside the house, and according to Gregory, it was still running. At the time, Gregory's stepfather, Danny Cleavenger, had been away for several days on a business trip to Seattle, meaning Gregory and Gail had been home alone together before her disappearance. To emergency responders, the scene Gregory described sounded deeply concerning. A possible break-in, a missing woman, a disturbed teenager claiming he had walked into chaos after school. But when deputies arrived at the home, they quickly realized something about the situation didn't feel right. The house genuinely did appear destroyed. Items had been thrown around. The side door showed signs of forced entry. The door frame itself had been damaged badly enough to suggest someone had kicked or forced their way inside. And near that damaged doorway, investigators noticed a small droplet of blood on the floor. At first glance, it looked exactly like the kind of scene you would expect after a violent burglary. Deputies immediately began trying to locate Gail. They contacted her workplace and quickly learned something troubling. Gail had never shown up for work that day. Co-workers had already been attempting to contact her without success. Now the situation was escalating rapidly, because this no longer looked like a simple robbery. And while deputies were processing the scene, something else caught their attention. Gregory had visible scratches across his face. To investigators, scratches immediately raised concern because they can often be defensive wounds, injuries caused when a victim fights back during an attack. Naturally, deputies asked him how he got them, and that's where the first cracks in Gregory's story began to appear. Initially, Gregory claimed he had gotten into a fight at school with a friend named Dylan, At face value, it sounded plausible enough. Teenage boys get into fights. Scratches happen. But later, Gregory changed the story when speaking to his stepfather, claiming he got the scratches after falling down the stairs at school. When the detectives, after they overheard him give the stairs explanation to his stepfather, asked again, he changed his story once more, saying he had been in a fight after all, but suddenly the person involved wasn't Dylan anymore. Now it was someone named Joel. 3 different explanations for the same injuries within a very short period of time. And investigators noticed every single inconsistency, because the problem with lying is remembering which version you told. At that point, detectives began digging much deeper into Gregory's timeline. They wanted to verify every detail he had given them. Gregory had claimed he stayed at school all day before taking the school bus home, only discovering the ransacked house upon returning that afternoon. But when investigators contacted the school, his story immediately began to fall apart. School officials confirmed Gregory had not remained at school all day. In fact, he had left much earlier than he told the police, and perhaps even more damaging, he never took the school bus home at all. That revelation completely changed the direction of the investigation, because if Gregory had lied about something as simple and verifiable as his school schedule, what else was he lying about? Detectives began interviewing the teenagers Gregory had claimed to be in contact with around the period of Gail Cleavenger's disappearance. One of the first was Dylan Siegler. Initially, Dylan wasn't fully honest with investigators. He tried distancing himself from the situation, downplaying how involved he had been, and minimizing his contact with Gregory around the time Gail vanished.
What's going on, man?
Not much. How you doing today?
I'm Steve Wheeler. I'm a detective with the Sheriff's Office, Detective Mike Cox. How are you?
Pretty alright. How you doing?
Mind if we have a moment of your time?
Yeah.
You already have an idea what you're doing? Anybody contact you about anything?
No.
Okay. Have you talked to Greg today?
I saw him at school.
How good of friends are you guys?
I mean, I talked to him, but we're not like super close.
Okay.
Who's he super close with?
I don't really know. I don't talk to him that much to really find out. I only have like 2 close friends myself, so.
Okay. Who are your close friends?
There's Brian. He's a really good friend of mine, and then really Brian. He's like the only person I talk to on a daily basis.
What's his last name?
Porras.
Porras?
Porras.
Do you know another kid named Joey? Joey Jr. or something like that?
That may be friends with Greg.
No. I mean, I don't know people by names really. So like I might have seen them, but I don't know them.
But detectives had already started identifying inconsistencies in everyone's timelines, and the more pressure they applied, the harder it became for Dylan to maintain the lie. Eventually, he broke. Dylan admitted that Gregory had told him something horrifying. According to him, Gregory confessed that he had killed his mother. Even then, Dylan claimed he initially thought Gregory was lying or exaggerating. Dylan explained to detectives that Gregory had staged the burglary scene inside the home to make it appear as though someone had broken in and abducted Gail. And Gregory wanted the scene to look convincing, so he handed stolen property from the house to his friends and instructed them to hide the items elsewhere, things that would make the burglary appear real. This made the entire situation feel even colder to investigators. Dylan also revealed another horrifying detail. Gregory had allegedly buried Gail's body near a church property with a fire pit behind it. At that point, detectives weren't searching for a missing woman anymore. They were searching for a body. When detectives spoke to another one of Gregory's friends, Brian Porras, they encountered a very similar pattern. Just like Dylan, Brian initially lied. He minimized his involvement and tried to distance himself from the situation. But eventually, under questioning, he admitted that he had helped dispose of items connected to the staged burglary. Still, Brian insisted that he never truly believed Gregory had killed his mother. By this point, detectives had heard enough. The scratches on Gregory's face, the inconsistencies about where he had been, who he had been with, and what he had been doing. With every contradiction piling up, detectives decided to stop treating Gregory Ramos like a worried son and start treating him like a suspect. When Gregory was brought into the interrogation room, the energy changed immediately. This wasn't the emotional teenager from the 911 call or the frightened boy deputies had first encountered standing outside his home. Sitting across from the detectives, Gregory appeared calm, detached, at times almost annoyed, as if the questions themselves were inconveniencing him. It was an unsettling level of control for a 15-year-old. Eventually, one of the detectives decided to stop dancing around the obvious. He leaned forward, looked Gregory directly in the eyes, and asked him a question that immediately changed the tone of the interview. "Did you kill your mother? Did you lie to my face?" For a moment, Gregory didn't crack. He admitted that things at home had been tense on November 1st, 2018. He told detectives he had received a D in biology, and when his mother found out, she grounded him. She took away his phone. And according to Gregory, that punishment led to another argument between them. At first, it sounded like a story most families could relate to, but then Gregory's story started taking a darker turn. He told detectives that after everyone had gone to bed that night, he quietly snuck into his parents' room sometime after midnight. He retrieved the phone his mother had confiscated. Then he started calling friends. He admitted stealing Gail's vehicle, sneaking out of the house, meeting up with friends, driving around, and drinking alcohol, breaking every boundary his mother had tried to put in place. At this point, Gregory may have believed he was still controlling the conversation, that he was giving detectives just enough truth to satisfy them. But what he didn't realize was that detectives were already several steps ahead. So investigators began pushing back. They confronted Gregory with timelines. The lies were stacking up so fast that even Gregory seemed to realize the game was over. He leaned back in his chair, almost irritated, and then said, "All right, fuck it. I'll tell you what happened." And just like that, the killer started talking, without emotion. Gregory looked at the detectives and said, "I strangled her to death." What disturbed investigators wasn't just the confession. It was how casual he sounded, as if he wasn't describing the murder of his own mother, but simply recounting an inconvenience. Gregory claimed that during the argument, Gail had slapped him across the face, and according to him, that was the moment he snapped. He wrapped both hands around her neck and began strangling her. But what came next would horrify even seasoned investigators, because Gregory admitted the attack didn't last seconds. It didn't even last a few minutes. According to his own confession, the attack lasted nearly 30 minutes. During that time, Gail fought for her life. She clawed desperately at Gregory's face, trying to survive. Suddenly, those scratches deputies had noticed earlier made perfect sense. Investigators later said that this was no longer a moment of teenage rage. This was no longer an impulsive outburst. Gregory had time to think, time to stop, time to save her, and he chose not to. After Gail was dead, Gregory tied her feet together. He dragged her body across the floor, loaded her into a vehicle, and drove her to a nearby church. Behind that church was a fire pit, and Gregory began digging a grave. Gregory admitted to burying his mother there, but even then, he wasn't finished thinking about what he could gain. He confessed that he tried removing Gail's wedding ring because he planned to pawn it for money. And when he couldn't get it off, he admitted he considered breaking her finger, but didn't have the right tool. Then he dumped evidence, got rid of clothing, covered his tracks, and went back home. Later, with the help of Dylan Siegler and Brian Porras, Gregory staged the perfect scene. He broke the door frame, scattered property across the house, removed electronics, made it look like burglars had torn through the home. He wanted investigators to believe his mother had vanished during a violent break-in, and for a brief moment, he thought he had pulled it off. In fact, during that same interrogation, Gregory looked at detectives, smirked, and said, "You should give me a Grammy for that 911 call." Following his confession, whatever image Gregory Ramos had tried earlier to create for investigators completely fell apart. There was no mystery left to solve. What detectives now had was a 15-year-old boy who had calmly admitted to murdering his own mother, Gail Cleavenger, burying her body beneath a church fire pit, staging an elaborate cover-up, and then bragging about how convincing his 911 performance had been. As details of the case became public, even veteran investigators struggled to hide their disgust. Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood publicly described Gregory as soulless. Detectives who had sat across from him during that chilling confession described him as cold, calculated, and emotionally detached. Those words would follow Gregory Ramos throughout the rest of the case, because the more investigators learned about what happened that night, the harder it became to see this as an impulsive act of teenage anger. Because of the brutality of the crime, Gregory was not treated as an ordinary juvenile offender. Despite being only 15 years old at the time of the murder, prosecutors made the decision to try him as an adult. The evidence against him was overwhelming. There was the confession. There was the physical evidence. There were the lies he told investigators. And there were the statements from his friends, Dylan Siegler and Brian Porras, who had eventually confirmed what Gregory had done. As the case moved through the court system, it became painfully clear that Gregory had very few options left. In 2020, he decided to plead guilty. He admitted responsibility for first-degree murder, abuse of a dead body, and tampering with physical evidence. In exchange for that guilty plea, Gregory Ramos was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Because Gregory committed the crime as a juvenile, the law allows for a judicial review after 25 years. That does not guarantee his release. It simply means that decades from now, a court may one day decide whether the teenager who murdered his own mother has changed or whether he should remain exactly where he is. But for many people following this case, the most emotional moments didn't happen during the interrogation. They happened in the courtroom. Because despite everything Gregory had done, his own grandmother stood before the court and prayed for him. She asked God to protect him. She asked God to keep him safe. She asked that his soul remain pure. And for many people watching, that moment was almost as difficult to process as the crime itself. A mother had lost her daughter. A grandmother had lost her child, and yet somehow, she still found enough love in her heart to pray for the grandson who had taken her away. Later, Gregory himself stood before the court and addressed the room. He apologized for what he had done. He said he wasn't there to make excuses. He admitted that he had not only stolen his mother from himself, but from everyone who had ever loved her, and he asked for forgiveness. For some people, those words sounded sincere. Some believed that after everything Gregory had done, he was finally beginning to understand the true weight of his actions. Some believed age, anger, and immaturity had collided in one horrifying night, and that perhaps, after decades behind bars, he might truly regret what he had done. But others couldn't forget the interrogation, couldn't forget the joking, couldn't forget the bragging, couldn't forget the complete lack of emotion, and perhaps most chilling of all, they couldn't forget Gregory looking detectives in the eye and saying, "You should give me a Grammy for that 911 call." Gregory wasn't the only person facing consequences. His friends, Dylan Siegler and Brian Porras, were also charged with helping cover up the murder after Gail's death. Both faced serious legal consequences, but their outcomes were far less severe than Gregory's. Their level of cooperation, the extent of their involvement, and their willingness or unwillingness to eventually tell the truth played a major role in how their cases were resolved.